My 1976 CJ still had the original fuel tank, so it's over 40 years old. It was time to replace it. It was getting a little rusty and causing me some fuel problems. So here's the process I went through, some of the things I learned, and the parts I used to do the job. Taking off the original tank isn't too hard. There's 7 bolts. They're pretty rusty, so don't be kind to them if they torque off. No big deal. You're not going to use them anyways. Cut these 2 vent lines. Cut off the fuel line and the return line. Notice I shoved some pencils in there to reduce the vapors. Fill line and the filler vent are all with clamps, so just unclamp those and the whole thing drops out. It's not too heavy, but it helps to have a lift. There's a little tab on the back of this thing. They weren't using it in this model year, so they bent it down to get it out of the way. Notice this filler tube's got about 7 inches long. It's got a flat spot on the bottom to get it over the frame. And there's some of these anti-squeak straps on here. So we flip it over, look at the bottom side. We can see those anti-squeak straps. We can see there's a couple of various dents that were pressed into the tank. Apparently important how it fits. And again, we can see that little tab in the back that wasn't used and is just folded over. And you can see that flat spot in the filler tube. That's so critical to make it fit over the frame rail. I went to the manufacturer of the aftermarket tanks and looked up the model they recommended for the 76 Jeep. They said use this 17720.09. It is not the right tank. It has a number of features that are wrong and just will not fit. If you look at the original tank, you can see it's got about a 7-inch filler tube. It's got no collar at all around the center unit. It's got a little guide for the primary hoses coming out of the tank. The 09 doesn't have them. The 08, which is recommended for models 1975 prior, fits this model. So I don't know if there was a mid-year change or the manufacturer got it wrong, but for my model 1976 Jeep, I needed the 17720.08 with the longer filler neck and the flat spot on the bottom of the filler. So you can see when the center unit goes in, there's no collar. I've got 2 vent lines over here, and I've got that little guide for the hoses. It's got that 7-inch long filler vent tube and filler tube with the flat spot on the bottom of the filler tube. These little corners on the edges here, I ground those down. They kept poking me. That was irritating. And then, of course, it's got that tab on the front edge that we're going to have to bend down. You can see there's no hole in the side of the filler tube. There is that flat spot on the bottom. But the hole was shown on the website picture. Well, I'm glad there wasn't one. I didn't need it, didn't want it. It wasn't on the original. The filler vent line wasn't quite at the right angle. I had to give mine a little bit of a bend to make it fit. Made me a little bit nervous, but it worked. On the bottom side of the tank, again, you can see this little tab. We've got to have to bend it. And you can see that flat spot in the filler line that we need. And that longer filler tube, about 7 inches long. And all the little dents and everything are identical to that original tank, so it looks like it's going to be a good fit. So there's a skid pan. I cleaned it up. That's the front edge. This is the back edge. There's 4 bolts along the back edge, and there's 3 along that front edge. There's also this little square hole here and this little hole here, which is for the hold down strap. There's only 1 strap on this model. Some had 3, I guess, but this one only had 1. And that can pretty much stay in place when you remove the tank. It has to be in place when you put the tank in. So there it is in place there. I'm going to all this trouble, so I figure I might as well replace all the hardware. You're going to need 7 of these 5 16-inch bolts. I used 3/4 inch long. The originals were 7/8, but 3/4 worked fine. It's a serrated flange bolt. back edge, the 4 bolts are held on with these clip nuts. It's a blind nut, has to clip onto the frame. The front edge 3 bolts are held on with serrated flange nuts. I did as much as I could in stainless just because I could. You're going to need some hose clamps. I used just a 2 3/4 inch for the main filler, or 1 1/4 inch if I remember correctly for the vent line, and a bunch of these 1/2 inch for all the fuel lines, and then a nut and lock washer for the hold down strap. I made up some anti-squeak straps out of some 1/8 inch neoprene I had in the shop. You need 4 of these, 3 for the tank, 1 for the hold down strap. You're also going to need some fuel line, so both a 1/4 inch ID and a 5/16 inch ID fuel hoses. I replaced the sending unit as well. Again, I bought another one from OMX. Came with all the stuff I needed. It's got an extra ground wire that the original didn't have. The hoses I put on ahead of time with these little crimp stainless steel clamps, and it came with the hold down ring and the O-ring, so everything I needed. Get yourself one of these motorcycle lifts. Really makes it easier to drop that tank when it's got some fuel in it. Empty ones goes up pretty easy, but if it's got fuel in it, gets pretty heavy pretty fast. I had to shim this up with some 2x4s to get the right height. So first thing I did was try to bend that tab down, and when I installed it, it just didn't work. I couldn't bend it sharp enough or at the right place. So when I tried to install it, it just still had clearance issues. So plan B, just cut it off. Then I tried to get the hoses underneath this hose guide, and they bent it too small. They won't fit, so I had to give a little bit of a pry to it to get it up high enough for the hoses. The retaining ring for the sending unit, once the O-ring's in there, it lines up, and the retaining ring, it has to be hammered underneath the guides. The sending unit only has tabs inside to line up a certain direction, so you can't really get it wrong. Okay, all assembled here. I've got the strap on it on the skid plan, and I got my sender unit and ground wire and gauge wire. 2 vent tubes already in there. I cut them a little bit long, everything a little bit long. I was going to trim it to fit underneath. Pretty much push it under and put the 7 bolts in, hose clamps on both sides. Not too bad after that. I hope that helped, and good luck with your project.